So patch 14.2 is coming out tomorrow onto the live servers, and there's been a couple of really interesting sort of meta predictions and things that have been shifting that people sort of expect for once the patch actually hits. So in today's video, I kind of want to talk a little bit about my own personal meta predictions, but on top of that, a lot of the other consolidated opinions I've seen from different streamers, different players, and just talking to other people in the high elo community, such like that. Also, you might notice that currently my background is a bit different. I'm actually traveling right now, and I am actually using a travel rig to record everything, and it feels very weird. Normally I do everything in OBS in one take, but I'm gonna have to edit quite a bit to hopefully make sure this doesn't come out looking like dookie. But let me know what you guys think about the setup. I'd love to hear your opinions on it. If there's anything I should change, let me know. I know, again, the room's a bit echoey. That's like the one thing I've really noticed, but let's talk about it. So first off, let's talk about the patch analysis. Now, in my meta predictions, I have first written down everything that's sort of been meta in sort of the 14.1b lines. So in the S tier, which is basically strong all the time, things like Rengar, things like Cypher, Draven, Zeri, things like Zeri with Flux Capacitor. In the A tier is strong, but usually requires some level of tempo, things like MF Flex, Tempo Nitro, Vertical Exotech, especially with the current Exotech augments, 5 Street, which is sort of the main AP meta line right now, and Vertical Anima from the good spots. Conditionally strong in the B tier, we have things like Fiddle reroll, TF reroll, Vayne reroll, and Veigar reroll, along with Divinicore Z and Nitro Jin, excuse me. Divinicore Z I actually might not even put in B tier, I might even put in C tier. I really think that this was like a PvE comp that people think was gonna be good, but it just keeps getting worse and worse as more lines become optimized. So I don't see that really being the case. I'm just gonna take it off the list for now. And then finally in C tier, which you need a lot to go right, is 4 Vanguard, 4 Marksman, Shaco, and Cypher LeBlanc. I'm not gonna go too deep into like any of these lines. I think we're mostly all on the same page as to what these lines are, but if you have any questions about them, feel free to ask me. There are also a bunch of websites that have these lines that are available to you, things like TFT Academy. I did a patch analysis like a while back on 14.1a, but there's a lot of lines that are in there that are still holding up that are here as well. There's some other things like MF Flex, which is a bit more newer, that was later in the patch, but we can talk about those later down the line. As we scroll down a little bit, as you can see here, there's a 14.2 patch overview. This is like my own personal notes. I was just like typing out the notes that came as I was watching like the rundown and like my own little opinions and stuff. There's nothing too crazy in here. I just wrote like the general things that got buffed. There's some things that I bolded that I was like, oh, this is like really surprising by the numbers, or maybe something looked a little bit different. But so for example, 6 Boombot got buffed, 6 Golden Ox got buffed, Nitro reroll got buffed, and Exotech items like Cybercoil and Hollowbow got buffed. Hyperfangs also got buffed, which I think is really interesting. We'll talk a little bit about more of that in just a little bit. Champions wise, and again, I'm just gonna quickly go through all of these because I'm assuming you guys already know all this. Poppy damage output got increased. Doesn't really change much in my opinion. I still think she's not that great in terms of one cost. Also, the way the Cyber Boss works, you don't really want her to be the Cyber Boss. Like, it's usually you want Veigar, and Veigar without Cyber Boss feels like shit. So not really thinking that's gonna shake anything. Shaco, 25% spell AD buff. Shaco's a weird one. I feel like this unit, at a certain point, he hits critical mass. And right now we're sort of in that space of, hey, he's not dangerous right now, but if he hits critical mass, it's gonna become a problem, So you never really know the numbers buffs. This could be what pushes them over the edge. I don't think it is, but you never really know with Shaco. It really is that one thing that like pushes him over, and then suddenly everyone's playing him and he's broken. So I think it's more of like a design with his kit, but we can talk about that another time. The Fury is the big one that I think is gonna be really, really important to note. Yes, there are 5 buffs across the board, which is pretty ridiculous. If you ask me, and I know, you shouldn't be counting the number of buffs to figure out whether or not something's broken or not, but here's the thing. I've noticed that some of my people that I talked to have said that Naafiri reroll is good. Like, it's already good in the current patch. It's just that it requires a specific line, or it requires a specific opener that actually makes it work. I've seen Dishso make it work. I've seen Raptor make it work. I've seen a bunch of other players make it work. I can't make it work. But to be fair though, I am much worse at my line selection than they are. So I think if you are good at line selection, this Naafiri line can be good already. And it's actually proven to beat boards like Rengar boards and like actual meta boards. So like, it's already good is the thing. It just requires some conditions to go right. And the conditions are not too difficult to find. And I think that now with all these buffs, plus Hyperfang's buff, Naafiri's best item, is all being put together into one patch, I think this is gonna be a really, really, really dangerous thing that's gonna be on the next patch. And quite honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if there's a B patch for Naafiri, specifically. I actually think that this will be overtuned as fuck as soon as the patch goes live. That's my big concern. But we'll talk a bit more as things go on. We'll turn to later. TF also got buffed. Basically, his base got buffed, but his hat version got nerfed, which I think makes a lot of sense. TF without his hat actually feels terrible. Jarvan got some pretty substantial buffs as well. We can talk about that a little bit later. Annie got buffed as well. I don't know if this changes things, but I want to talk about it a little bit later as well when we go over the actual like meta predictions and lines. Miss Fortune got her base buffed, but her hat got nerfed. But the overall number of bullets that get shot out is still 12. So at the end of the day, I don't think this actually really changes anything. It just slightly makes MF base a little bit better, which I think is nice. I think, you know, sometimes you're not gonna be able to find that 3 Syndicate 3-piece to fit in, but nowadays it is a lot more common that you see people play Braum Darius, and then you play the Leona plus the Gragas, and then that way you have a fortified front line, and then that opens up Anima if you have the Aurora, and then you can fit in the Xayah, right? That's sort of the main line right now for Miss Fortune. I don't think it changes too much, but I do think that this will become a lot more of the default compared to what people are playing now, especially with Zeri. Cho'Gath got some interesting changes as well, basically less reliant on 6 Bruiser, which I think is great. Right now you don't see anybody itemizing Cho'Gath 2 unless they're playing 6 Bruiser, so I'm hoping that this makes him playable at 2. I'm really curious to see, because I think a lot of things do end up shifting if he does become playable at 2. 2 Bruisers more specifically. And Samir with a 580 buff as well. Some items got changed, some augments got changed as well. Again, I'm not gonna go too deep into here. The only one I really want to point out is the Jax hero augment. His numbers look really high to me. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I've heard, like through the grapevine, that this Jax augment might be good now. It requires some things to go right, but if you remember set 8 hero augments, I think the itemization is gonna be similar to like a Ginsu's Ginsu's BT QSS or something along that lines of like, or like Ginsu's BT and like Titans or something like that. Like some variation. I think QSS is gonna be in there though, but that used to be a very prominent line back in like set 8. So I'm curious to see if we're ever gonna see it come back. I really think that we have the conditions to make it work. I do think that now, I think based on some of the Exotech items, it could really work well on Jax, especially I think the chassis got buffed. So I think that could be really, really good on him as well. Plus like some level of itemization, maybe you skip the Titans, it's just like BT and QSS or like BT Ginsu, something like that. There's a lot of CC in the set, so I wouldn't be surprised if it's not good because of that, but maybe with QSS it could be good. I think there's some variations to make it very, very strong, so I'm curious to see how this one performs. Poppy hero got buffed, Silas, whatever. And again, the rest of these, nothing was too crazy. Hall of Mirrors, I do want to point out, there was a bug fix on Hall of Mirrors where now all the traits now work with clones. So I didn't know that that was a thing. And that actually means, I think Cyberboss Kabuko with Hall of Mirrors is gonna be super fucking busted. It was already like an interaction that people were aware of, but I think because it didn't work with the trait, it just wasn't that good. But now I think with that interaction in place, it sounds like it's gonna be pretty good now. So I'm really curious to see how well Hall of Mirrors performs, generally speaking. I'm really curious to see how that plays out. Malicious monetization as well has a really important bug fix. No longer counts PvE rounds, which is huge. So if you ever had your augments shift, and let's say it's 4-5 and you took malicious, 4-7 neutrals, too bad buddy, you're down 1 round of gold. Well, that's no longer the case, so I think that's super, super great. Some nerfs as well across the board. Temper Nitro got nerfed. Exotech items, specifically Flux and Pulse Stabilizer got nerfed, so that's really good to see, especially because you're seeing that BIS Zeri is actually Pulse, Flux, Ginsu's. Okay. The Pulse is also incredibly good on Jhin, so I'm glad to see that this is becoming nerfed, especially with Flux being so prominent in the current meta. I think this is great. Champion, so Rengar being the 3 cause that got nerfed quite a bit. Not enough that I think he's out of the meta per se, but I think he is a little more conditional now. So you're not having players like Solus who just, not to name drop anybody, but you know, 2020's Rengar and actually can find success with it. To be fair, he is crazy good at optimizing and one-tricking compositions, but at the end of the day, it should not, you know, that is a bit of a difficult to stomach playstyle. So I'm a little curious to see how it plays out. But overall, I think Rengar will still be playable. It's just not as prominent as it is currently. Augments as well, so Cyberdeck and Trial Run are the big ones that really, really need to be like noticed. These are the 2 Exotech augments that got nerfed. So that's a huge, huge nerf to the line because a lot of vertical Exotech Especially if you're trying to play high tempo, these augments do a really good job of tempoing you into the 7 on 4-2, where you can actually just build out the board with the Sejuani 2 and the Zeri 2. I think without these augments to help you really like tempo your early game, this line becomes a bit more precarious, especially when you consider how strongly nerfed both of these augments just got. Obviously, Cyber Deck was way too strong as a gold augment, and I think Trial Run was pretty good as well, but it did get nerfed quite heavily. So I'm curious to see how it works out, but I don't think these augments are nearly as clickable as they used to be. You probably need a good Cyber Deck, or rather Exotech spot to really take these. Also, Support Spire got a bit of a nerf because it actually got bug fixed. So before it actually ignored CC immunity, but now it does not. I don't think that necessarily affects anything because you don't really see too much CC immunity, generally speaking, when it comes to a lot of boards, but it is like the tiniest hair nerf. So I just thought that was something, you should note. In terms of final predictions, let's actually talk about it. So 14.2 final predictions on the meta. So I think the S tier, which is, I'm going to change the definition of them a little bit, so bear with me, but S tier, your default. So things like Cypher is probably going to be a default if you happen to find it early. I think 5 Street is going to be super turbo strong now, just because not necessarily anything in the line got buffed, but because everything around it, specifically other lines, got nerfed. And this has been already a prominent line. So I would not be surprised if 5 Street becomes like the default. It's already the default, but now it's going to become the default AP meta line, I think. MF Flex, I still think is really good right now. I do find it to be the default AD line. Maybe someone can correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I do think that MF is super strong, and we didn't see any Aurora nerfs or Viego nerfs. So like, I wouldn't be surprised if MF Flex is if not already, the default AD line coming into the next patch. Nitro Jin, I think, is going to get super buffed. We already talked about it a little bit with the Naafiri buffs, but again, it's more about Naafiri being super strong and the fact that Nitro reroll specifically got buffed. Nitro, the actual tempo version of it, got nerfed, so I don't actually predict that being that incredibly strong or incredibly prominent, but I mean, you can probably still play in the early game. It is what it is. A tier, let's go over the strong conditions. So A tier is just, you have this important thing that the game is giving you, therefore you can really strongly consider playing this line. That's kind of how I define A tier. So in this line, I have things like Anima, Rengar, Fiddle, Veigar, Vayne, and Jax. Vertical Anima conditions are things, it's the same as it is now. Strong Anima openers or any sort of strong augments. This is more like, Little Buddies is more like on like 3-2 or 4-2. If you're like, okay, I'm already thinking about Anima, then like you can definitely click on it then. Anima Spire, I think is still good enough that you would take it, especially with a strong Anima opener. Rengar conditions are kind of the same as they are now. You want to play something that'll preserve your HP early, but you also have a strong item holder, and I do think Naafiri is going to be the item holder for Rengar lines if you decide to play it, if you're not going to play Naafiri for some reason. And then strong artifacts, things like Prowlers and Silvermere. But again, there's no reason to not play Naafiri if you're going to roll these artifacts. So I think Rengar is going to get less popular, not because Rengar is that much worse, but because Naafiri is so much more popular and so much better as an AD melee line. And it's easier to hit faster on 3-2, save more HP. Fiddlesticks. Fiddlesticks has the same conditions as he always has, same thing like artifacts, Sniper's Focus, Blinding Jewel, Talisman if you want to throw it onto Cho'Gath, right? These are all really, really great for the line. Augments, it's very, very, very important that you pick the correct augments for this line. Things like Spirit Link, things like Titanic Strength. Investment can be good. I've seen like good lines and good positions come out of investment. Not always the case, but I think it's good enough. Cooking Pot is amazing in this line as well, so I should have wrote that down as well, but now you know. Veigar conditions are the same as they always are. I still think, again, that this line is more reliant on you have to hit like a good augment for it. So things like New High Score or Cower Weaklings. I was never a big believer in Cower Weaklings until very recently, but it is good enough that you can still top 4 with the line. I've definitely done it before. So I still think it's good enough, but New High Score is definitely like the augment that if you hit it, then you want to play Veigar. Artifacts and Manazane are really great as well, but I want to talk a little bit more about that in just a little bit. I do think Manazane has a potentially better line, but we'll talk about it later. Vayne conditions, the same thing, it's just augments. It's like, it's Anger Issues or Cat 5. I think Anger Issues, in the current patch, is like not very common or prominent, but I think in this next patch, it's gonna be a lot more prominent because of the Jarvan buffs. So I think like Vayne on top of Jarvan, I think they actually use all the stats super, super nicely now. So I think if you hit Anger Issues, like Vayne is a really, really good comp that you can consider. So that's something to keep in mind. Jax conditions, again, is like Jax Zone 2-1 and then BT Ginsu QSS is probably the way to go. There's probably some other ways you can itemize him as well, but that's sort of the way that I view him. Again, he is a Bastion, and I think the main line is 6 Bastions, so you're probably going to end up playing a lot of Bastions on your board. And then with the Transistor buff to that specific augment, basically like your Bastions do, I think they get a percentage of their armor MR bonus, and then it turns into attack speed, I believe. So something along that line, but that got buffed. It went from 25 to 50%. So it's very possible that this Jax line, I think, has a lot of things that can go really well for it. So I'm actually putting it at like low A tier, but I don't know yet. It's a prediction. B tier, it's like strong condition, same as A tier, but you also need really, really good tempo. Whether that's economically or you are really, really strong tempo with like a strong opener and you're able to preserve a lot of HP. Most of the time when I say good tempo though, I am referring to strong HP. Not too often am I talking about the economy side. Lines include Exotech, Vertical, Slayer Z, Shaco, Golden Ox, TF Reroll, and Cypher LeBlanc. So we can talk about each of these real quick. The conditions for Exotech Verticals, I'm not 100% confident on my read. So if you see NCOR, that means not confident on read. So this is the ones that I'm like a little more like, I want to see how things play out before I can like confidently say like this is what it is. But the way I see it right now is that augments like Cyber I can try to run because they got nerfed really hard. It's a little more precarious to play the lines, but still possible that the lines are still very playable. It's just I need to see how not only the augments are, but also how the item nerfs, the item buffs happen with the Exotech items. So again, Flux and Pulse Stabilizer both got nerfed, but everything else got buffed, like Hollow Bow and Chassis and all of those. So it's interesting to see how it'll play out. It's you know, there is a world where it's possible that the buffs aren't enough and the nerfs are too much, so the lines is just completely unplayable. But we won't know until we see it in action, right? And we have a lot more games to see, and then we can like, you know, build off a read off that. Slayer Z, I think it's gonna be fine. It's already a fine line already. It's kind of like you kind of play around the Senna, or you play around Vayne, or you play around Z. There's different ways to flex around the verticals. So I still think it's a strong line. It's a lot more dependent on things to go well in the early game, or more specifically, you have a strong board and it leans you towards Slayers, but it's tough. It's kind of like you're kind of flexing the early game, and then you kind of like stumble into Slayers is how it usually ends up being the case. So, I mean, except for like, you know, augments like Cat 5. So I think it'll still be good. I think it's not like the craziest of lines, but it's still gonna be great under the right spots. Shaco, I think Shaco, again, it really is. I'm gonna write NCOR here as well because I don't really know how I feel about, Jesus, I don't know if you guys can hear the wind. It is fucking windy outside. But Shaco, I'm gonna write not confident on read just because I haven't seen enough of it. I've seen PP top 4, sorry, Dish Soap, Jesus. Dish Soap top 4 with it before, but he had like I think he had like a Boombot Slayer Syndicate like trainer golem on 2-1, and that was the only time he took it, and even then he went 4th. So, nah, I don't know. We'll see. If it turns out to be critical mass and it's good enough, then sure, why not? So small conditions are things like lots of early Shakos, lots of strong item slams early. He really likes GA, i.e. Hodge, to sort of like his BIS. Things like artifacts, he really likes mittens for some reason. My guess is that like as soon as he hits somebody and kills it, he just runs to the next thing and just starts autoing them immediately. So I can see mittens being really, really great. It is his best artifact. Death Defiance is also great. Prowler's is really great. Prowler's Shako is really fun to watch if you've never seen it before. So really interesting builds there. But again, it's a bit hard to justify playing this over Naafiri. So I would not be inclined to play Shaco if I got like a Prowler's Claw. I'd be more inclined to play Naafiri. So we'll see how things play out there. Golden Ox. I think Golden Ox is a really weird line. Again, not confident on the read here, but it's weird for a couple of reasons, and it's more specifically because of the board. I have yet to see a consensus on the Golden Ox board. I have a different read on it than I think Dish Soap does and Frodan does. I saw their TFT Academy board, I didn't agree with it, and then TFT Genius, their site is down, and I haven't had a chance to talk to Raptor or any of the EU people, so I haven't had a chance to really talk about it with anybody. But I don't know if you've tried this before, but go into tactics.tools and just try to build a Golden Ox vertical board. It feels very awkward because, you know what, we can show you a little bit, but I was thinking about this a lot, but this is kind of where I ended up with in terms of the board. Now, I know it looks a bit odd, but the idea being is that I know that the general idea would be that you'd want to play around Aphelios and Annie, but I actually don't think that's the case. And the reason why I say that is because I don't think the Aphelios unit is good enough. I actually think that Samira 1 might actually just be better than Aphelios 2. So I think this line is really weird because it's kind of relying on hitting Samira on 8. If you remember back in set 9 when Legends were a thing and there was like, what's it called, Dragon King, and then you had to roll on 8 to find 1 RE to go 9. Like that's kind of what this is. That's how I view Golden Ox, is that you kind of want to hit one copy of Samira on 8 is ideal, but if you don't, then I think you have to fast 9 and find the Samira ASAP. that's sort of the board. I think realistically speaking that with the Cho'Gath buffs, it's possible that you can play Cho'Gath as well, but I do think Mordekaiser fits better if you happen to find a Viego just because you do get that techie bonus in. And again, it's really hard to judge whether or not this Cho'Gath unit's actually going to be playable as 2 Bruiser. At the end of the day, Leona is such a better unit overall that I do not see why you wouldn't play Leona. Another thing to note as well, there's a lot of things to consider about this line, but when it comes to Golden Ox, I think you need a +1. I don't think this line is playable without a +1. You need a +1 emblem or a +1 dummy. Ideally an emblem, but you didn't use an augment for it, is how I kind of view it. So I think you really do want that +1 because it's really, once you hit 6, I don't know if you saw the numbers, they buffed the shit out of this trait. So if you get to 6, I think the faster you can get to it, the better. And I think if you can get to 4, you are already farming a lot of economy and resources. So I can see it being good. I can see it being good, but I think it's a line where you are item holding Graves for Samira, but you also need to make sure that you're prioritizing Annie items because Annie 2 is going to be your main carry on level 8. So it's weird. It's a really weird line where the carries and the units to item hold for each other don't really make a lot of sense. But I also think this is one of those lines that we haven't fully solved yet, myself included. So that's kind of how I see it right now. Again, it's like a 4 Golden Ox on 2-1, and then you have an emblem somewhere, and then I think the line is playable. But even then, it's like you need a lot of things to go right. That's how I view it right now. So I could be wrong though. It's very possible it's still completely dog shit, and that's just how the game is. Or it's really, really good once someone has either optimized the line or it just the numbers are there to support it. So it's gonna be one of the two. Again, I think it's possible it can be good, but to me, the way I view it right now is that it feels like a Samira lottery because the Aphelios unit by himself, even with the damage jam from Golden Ox, I don't think he's doing enough. And again, I could be completely wrong on that based on the 6 Golden Ox amp values and like yada yada yada. But again, it's one of those things we have to see when it comes into play. But I do view the line as like a Samira cap out line, not necessarily Aphelios. So I'm really curious to see how this line gets optimized because again, I don't think it's fully solved. Finally, we can go into the C tier as well. I don't want to go over these for too long. Silas, Boombot, 4 Vanguard, 4 Marksman, and Tempo Nitro. Silas, I'm gonna be honest, I don't know what the fuck the line is. I'm just gonna, if I see that augment, I'm not gonna click on it, and I'm not gonna bother to learn the line until I either hear through the grapevine it's good, or I see it do well in somebody's game. Until then, I just don't think I'm clicking on this augment, even after the buffs. I don't think it's that good. Vertical Boombot. I think this is also one of those lines that like you need a +1. Like you actually need a +1 or it's just unplayable. There's a lot of very poor data on this line because 1, 6 is really hard to hit. You need an Urgot, and that's already hard. Like you need an Urgot on top of like all other conditions, so you want to hit like Boombot early. But then the meta line seems to be you play around Cog 3 and then you tempo with Cog 3, but Cog 1 right now isn't that great. Maybe with the buffs to the trait it's enough, but right now I'm just not convinced that Cogma is really that great and good enough to really tempo with. I just don't like this line very much. I know, though, I will say this, there is a Boombot TF line that's sort of been trending. I don't think it's very good, but it's been trending. I think it's called Boom Boom TF. It's been trending around and I've seen some variations of it, but I'm not 100% confident it's gonna be good. Also just because of the fact that TF with the hack got nerfed. So we'll see. We'll see. I wouldn't be surprised if Boom Boom TF becomes like a B tier line, but that's about as far as I see it, especially because you don't end up really going to 6. You always end up with like 4. And 6 is the thing that got buffed. So we'll see, we'll see. 4 Vanguard, 4 Marksman, I think this is one of those things that's like, you happen to like, the line fell into your lap, so you're playing it. AKA, you found a Leona 2 and a Xayah 2, and you're holding the Aphelios on your roll down, and then you were also dropped like a double Ginsu's because you're prioritizing your Xayah items, but they got dropped the double Ginsu's on 3-7 on Wolves, and you're just like, well, shit, and then you roll down, you found Aphelios pair, and you're like, well, shit. So it's like, you might as well play it. There's some augments that go really, really nicely in this line, things like Flatline, things like Clockwork Accelerator. Ideally, you are triple combat augments in this line. This line like really needs the power from the augments, otherwise it's really hard to beat other boards in general. This line is so shit. But that being said, if you can hit all your 2-star forecasts on 8 and then still have triple combat and win out, or rather tempo with it and still survive throughout stage 4 and like even like early parts of stage 5, then so be it. Then feel free to go ahead. But overall though, I don't see this line being that great. And then finally, Tempo Nitro, we've already talked about it a lot, but it got nerfed quite a bit into the ground. I don't see this being a super common play. If anything, you just pivot out at 4-2 and you play something else. But that's gonna basically do it for this meta prediction. I hope this was helpful. I hope this was a little interesting for you guys. I don't really do meta predictions too often because I do find them to get outdated kind of quickly, because it's like, well, we predict this and then suddenly it's not this, but you never know. So I think it's always healthy to talk about the game a little bit more and just figure out what is sort of the vibe, you know what I mean? But anyways, that's gonna do it. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope this was helpful. And again, let me know what you guys think about this travel rig setup. Again, first time using it. I'm not sure how easy it's gonna be to edit and post, but we're gonna see how that goes. Also, it's windy as fuck outside. I'm getting a little terrified, so I'm gonna go close the window. But anyways, stay healthy, stay happy, and I'll see you guys later. Take care, guys, and happy climbing.